After the guns had fallen silent and the echo of the duel faded, Lieutenant Henry Hawkeye stood alone, his rival slain, and his wife left in the shroud of scandal and mourning. The trial that followed sought to dissect the events leading to this tragic climax. The defense recounted the fateful tale, drawing the jury's attention back to the ill-starred month of April 1845, when James Seton, a man of stature and wealth, first crossed paths with Mr. and Mrs. Hawkeye. Seton, a retired military officer whose career bore little distinction, had ample time to indulge in the pleasures of Victorian high society. Amidst opulent balls and elegant salons, he became enchanted by Isabella Hawkeye, the striking wife of Lieutenant Hawkeye of the Royal Marines. Isabella, whether through her grace, wit, or beauty, quickly captured Seton's attention, sparking a dangerous infatuation. With her husband often away on duty, Seton grew emboldened. At first, his attentions were discreet, framed as innocent companionship, accompanying her on walks, offering her intriguing books, or providing harmless flattery. But the facade of harmlessness crumbled as his passion consumed him. One day, unable to suppress his feelings any longer, he confessed, "I can't keep playing these games with you any longer. Do you intend to give me a chance or not?" His words carried a veiled warning. Seton admitted he was risking his life by pursuing her, as it was inevitable that Lieutenant Hawkeye would discover his intentions. The social circles of Victorian England buzzed with rumors, for such transgressions were a potent mixture of gossip and peril. For centuries, the elite of Europe had resolved matters of honor with steel and shot, the duel serving as both a ritual and a spectacle. Born from the medieval practice of trial by combat, the duel had evolved by the Renaissance into a codified affair, governed by notions of chivalry and decorum. Yet, beneath its veneer of civility lay the stark reality, the settling of scores with deadly force. When Hawkeye learned of Seton's intentions, the affront to his honor as a husband and officer left him with little choice. Confrontation was inevitable, and society's unspoken code demanded resolution in the form of a duel. The men agreed to meet pistols in hand on neutral ground. As the tradition dictated, seconds ensured fair play, but the outcome was anything but just. The shot that rang out on that fateful day sealed Seton's fate, leaving his wife to mourn and Lieutenant Hawkeye to stand trial for defending his honor. The trial did not merely determine Hawkeye's guilt or innocence. It placed the very practice of dueling on trial, a practice that balanced precariously between its romanticized ideals and its grim, lethal reality. Victorian society, steeped in notions of honor, began to question whether this archaic ritual had a place in a modern world, or whether it should, like Seton himself, be consigned to history. Thus, the early modern gentleman found himself trapped in the web of honor, a fragile yet unyielding code that demanded action in the face of insult or disgrace. No matter how lofty his station or how grand the steps of his mansion, he was sometimes compelled by this cruel tradition to descend, meeting dishonor with cold steel or deadly shot. The purpose of the formal duel was not necessarily to kill, but to prove one's resolve, a willingness to risk life itself in defense of reputation. 4 sword duels, drawing first blood might suffice, but in England, where pistols had become the weapon of choice, the outcome was often fatal. Despite efforts to curb the practice, monarchs outlawing it, the church condemning it as sinful, and Enlightenment thinkers branding it as self-serving slaughter, dueling persisted into the 19th century. Among military officers, it was zealously upheld, a practice lightly punished by the courts and regarded as a grim necessity of rank and status. The tension surrounding James Seton was now escalating. The rumors about his advances toward Isabella Hawkeye, a woman married to Lieutenant Henry Hawkeye of the Royal Marines, had begun to circulate. One evening, as Seton paced in unease, there came a sudden knock at the door. Startled, Seton feared it was Lieutenant Hawkeye, come to demand satisfaction. But to his relief and confusion, it was Lieutenant Edward Pym, a young fellow officer of Hawkeye's, whose visit carried no immediate threat. Seton's obsession with Isabella had only grown, undeterred by the whispers that had surely reached her husband. Emboldened, he approached her again, this time with an extravagant proposition, offering her a ring. Seaton implored her to flee with him to London, renouncing his marriage and declaring his undying love for her. Isabella, however, remained firm. While maintaining the polite civility expected of a Victorian lady, she rejected his advances, her cool demeanor a stark contrast to Seaton's growing desperation. The matter might have remained contained, but the night of May 19th brought things to a breaking point. At a ball, amidst the glittering lights and sweeping melodies, Seaton approached Isabella once more, insisting she dance with him. To the astonishment of onlookers, Lieutenant Hockey, with an air of forced cordiality, allowed it. The dance, however, only stoked the embers of tension. After it ended, Seaton remained seated beside Isabella, refusing to yield his place when Hockey returned. The lieutenant's patience, worn thin by Seaton's persistence, finally snapped. "Sir, I should like to have a few private words with you," Hockey demanded, his tone carrying the weight of restrained fury. The two men withdrew to a side room, their voices rising in a heated exchange. When Seaton emerged, he made a weak attempt to save face, claiming that, as a former cavalryman, he could not duel a Royal Marine. But his words rang hollow, and Hockey was far from satisfied. Returning to the ballroom, Hockey's demeanor changed. In full view of the assembled guests, he unleashed a torrent of insults, branding Seaton a scoundrel and a blackguard. When Seaton remained obstinate, Hockey took the confrontation further, attempting to kick him and threatening to horsewhip him if he refused to fight. The challenge was clear, the humiliation unmistakable. For Seaton, there would be no escape from the duel now. Victorian society, with all its codes and constraints, had decreed that the only way forward was through the barrel of a pistol. The following morning, a formal challenge arrived at the Hockey residence, delivered by a man acting on behalf of James Seaton. It was a gesture of both honor and inevitability. In the tradition of dueling, each participant was required to appoint a second, an intermediary responsible for representing their interests. The second's primary duty was to attempt reconciliation, whether through an apology or another peaceful resolution. However, when Seaton's second approached Lieutenant Hockey, no apology could be brokered. The insult had gone too far. With no other option, the seconds arranged the terms of the duel, agreeing on the location and time before parting ways to prepare their principals. Lieutenant Hockey chose his second with care, selecting the young and relatively inexperienced Lieutenant Edward Pym, only 21 years old. Despite Pym's youth, Hockey trusted him implicitly. Together, they procured a pair of finely crafted, hair-trigger pistols, instruments as elegant as they were deadly. The day grew somber as the afternoon wore on, heavy gray clouds casting a pall over the harbor, and fog rolling in like a shroud over the impending confrontation. The two men crossed the harbor and made their way on foot to a secluded pebbled beach, the agreed-upon dueling ground. The seconds, acting as arbiters of the event, ensured that the rules of engagement were clear. A distance of 15 paces was measured, and each duelist was handed a pistol. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the combatants took their positions. The seconds called for silence, and then the signal was given, "Fire." Both men pulled their triggers. Hockey's pistol misfired, the flint failing to ignite the charge, while Seaton's shot went wide, missing its mark entirely. Speculation arose that young Lieutenant Pym, in his inexperience, had inadvertently handed Hockey's pistol at half-cock, a common safety precaution that rendered the gun unable to fire. Despite this, both men had fulfilled the primary purpose of the duel, to demonstrate their courage. By all accounts, the matter should have ended there, as custom dictated. But Hockey, still bristling with fury, demanded another round. His insistence defied the expectations of decorum, for a respectable second would typically dismiss such a notion as barbaric. Yet, the seconds reluctantly complied, handing each man their remaining pistol. The signal to fire was given once more. This time, Seaton missed again. Hockey, however, did not. His shot struck Seaton in the hip, severing a major artery. The man collapsed, blood pouring onto the pebbled ground as his seconds rushed to his aid. Despite the gravity of the moment, Hockey reportedly showed no emotion, his demeanor as cold and unyielding as the fog that surrounded them. With chilling calm, he declared, "I'm off to France," and fled the scene, leaving behind the lifeless form of his rival and the shattered silence of the beach. Seaton's death marked the tragic conclusion of a conflict born from passion, pride, and Victorian notions of honor. The duel, with all its rituals and justifications, had fulfilled its grim purpose. But at what cost? In the aftermath, whispers of scandal and legal proceedings would follow Hockey's escape, a stark reminder of the tenuous balance between tradition and the value of life in an age bound by the codes of a bygone era. Whether Lieutenant Hockey and Lieutenant Pym successfully fled to France or merely sought refuge in nearby hideouts remained a mystery, their whereabouts obscured by secrecy and speculation. Meanwhile, James Seaton, gravely wounded, was carried to the Quebec Hotel, where desperate efforts were made to save his life. Renowned surgeon Robert Liston, known for his remarkable speed and skill in the operating theater, was summoned from London. Upon his arrival, Liston faced a daunting task. With Seaton fully conscious, the surgeon began a grueling operation, slicing through the swollen tissues of the hip and groin to locate and tie off the severed artery. Despite Liston's precision, the wound festered. Infection set in, a grim reminder of the limitations of medical science in the Victorian era. After enduring 2 weeks of suffering, Seaton succumbed to his injuries, leaving behind a scandal that would reverberate through society. In the aftermath, Edward Pym was arrested and brought to trial for his role in the deadly duel. The proceedings captured the public's attention, not only for the tragedy itself, but for what it represented, a clash between traditional codes of honor and the rule of law. The defense made an impassioned argument, insisting that while society had grown critical of dueling, the practice was deeply rooted in the ideals of masculinity and social standing. They contended that men like Seaton and Hockey were bound by a code that dictated they must defend their honor through deadly force or face utter disgrace, forfeiting everything that gave their lives purpose and meaning. The judge, however, delivered a stark rebuke. Outdated customs, he reminded the jury, had no standing in English law, which regarded a fatal duel as premeditated murder, regardless of its ceremonial trappings. The judge emphasized that no individual was above the law, and that such archaic rituals only perpetuated senseless violence. The jury, swayed by both the defense's appeal to tradition and the judge's firm reminder of the law, deliberated only briefly before delivering their verdict. The case, though closed in the eyes of the court, left lingering questions about the place of honor, tradition, and justice in a rapidly modernizing society. It was a reminder of the fragile balance between the romanticized ideals of the past and the pragmatic demands of the present. After a few minutes of deliberation, the jury declared Pym not guilty. 3 months later, when Lieutenant Hockey was brought before the court, the jury needed only seconds to reach the same verdict. 6 years later, Isabella became involved in a scandalous affair with a Lieutenant Swain. This development may have caused Henry Hockey to question whether his wife had, years earlier, entertained the advances of the late Mr. Seaton. Now a captain, Hockey was tormented by the reports of his wife's infidelity and remarked in anguish, "What is to be done? I have already sent one man before his God over this matter. Am I to do it again?" The last fatal duel on English soil occurred in that same fateful year, fought not by Englishmen, but by French expatriates, disputing over the affections of an ex-girlfriend. By then, the once ingrained tradition of dueling in England was all but extinct, its romanticized ideals fading into history. Yet, for Lieutenant Henry Hockey, echoes of conflict lingered in his troubled life. Still embittered after the events with James Seaton, Hockey forbade Swain, another rival, from visiting Isabella during his absences. One fateful day, while walking with his wife, the two encountered Swain, who greeted Isabella warmly but directed a scornful comment at Hockey. Hockey, quick to anger, retaliated by striking Swain with his cane. Both men were arrested and court-martialed, Swain charged with contempt toward a superior officer, but in the end, both were acquitted. However, the damage to Hockey's already fragile reputation was done. Not long after, Isabella separated from Hockey, leaving him estranged from his wife and children. His health deteriorated, and in 1859, at the young age of 38, Hockey succumbed to tuberculosis, a man broken by the weight of his missteps and misfortunes. Isabella, now a widow, remarried to a man 11 years her junior, starting anew in a society that had once buzzed with rumors of her beauty and the tragedies she unwittingly inspired. At Lieutenant Pym's trial, Isabella had been described by the defense as a woman of remarkable beauty, whose charm once captivated the town and ignited fierce rivalries among her admirers. The fateful duel between Seton and Hockey, a conflict born of obsession and jealousy, came to symbolize the tragic end of a centuries-old tradition. It was the last of its kind, marking the close of an era when honor and violence were intertwined in the English psyche. On a different note, the Apollo ring from Thorim sounds truly incredible. Its blend of modern craftsmanship with an ancient vibe really sets it apart. Thorim's ability to imbue each piece with deep history and meaning, like the World War II ring crafted from an M1 Garand rifle or the Thor ring featuring a fragment of a Gibeon meteorite, is remarkable. Their pieces aren't just jewelry, they're stories you can wear. The 1-year warranty and fast shipping add even more value, making it a perfect gift for special occasions like weddings, anniversaries, or just as a meaningful keepsake. Have you had the chance to wear the Apollo ring out yet? It must feel amazing to carry such a unique piece of history with you.